This is The Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you at the Hidden Killers Podcast and True Crime Today.
What'd they say?
This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
Today we are diving straight into the Delphi case, part of the Delphi case that's been hiding in plain sight for years, hiding if you want to call it that, the depositions, the filings, the sworn testimony, and the internal investigative record that was never part of the polished public narrative. And I'm going to say this bluntly because there's no other way to say it. The picture these depositions paint is not one of a cohesive investigation that followed the evidence. It's the picture of an investigation fighting itself, contradicting itself, and stumbling through major decisions as if no one was steering the helm. We're not talking about minor mistakes. We're talking about the FBI possibly being kicked out or not, depending on which investigator you ask. We're talking about the Behavioral Analysis Unit setting up a flare about Nordic beliefs, ritualistic staging, symbolic indicators, only for the entire assessment to vanish from the internal record. We're talking about witness statements reshaped into something unrecognizable. When they hit the search warrant affidavit, we're talking about major leads in this case on possible third-party suspects, just brushed aside with no further action. Even after bizarre self-incriminating statements, we're talking about sticks left at the crime scene for days, a bullet with zero field documentation, and experts brought in 7 years too late to analyze photographs instead of evidence. This isn't fringe speculation. These aren't internet fantasies. This is what investigators themselves said under oath in black and white. And the only question now is what any of this means for Richard Allen, for the appeal, and for the integrity of the case itself. Here to help us dissect all of this, Bob Motta, host of the podcast Defense Diaries. Bob, let's dive into this shit show as it continues along. The shit tracks. Two lead investigators, two opposite sworn statements about whether the FBI was removed from the case. One says they were kicked out. The other says, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, just take us into this cesspool of confusion.
Yeah, so what we're talking about in terms of the new evidence, if you out there in the audience aren't aware, during the case itself, actually pre-trial, but before any hearings were conducted, there was this thing called a Franks motion that was filed by the defense, and the Franks motion is essentially saying, in layperson's terms, that when they went in to get the warrant, the arrest warrant and or the search warrant, that there were misrepresentations or omissions that were made, or straight up lies that were made by law enforcement in order to secure that particular warrant. Okay, so the defense filed it. It's a massive filing. It was like 136 pages. And with that, there was a ton of exhibits that were attached. Okay, so once that thing was resolved, if you want to call it that, even though there was never actually a hearing on it, but she did have a hearing on the third-party culprit stuff, which is kind of where the Franks memo lived in terms of the information that it put out to the public. Ultimately, what ends up happening is that Allen's convicted, and there's an appeal being processed right now. They're preparing the appellate briefs, and Allen's appellate lawyers are saying, look, we don't have the exhibits for this huge Franks memo. We need them. Because for whatever reason, the clerk, Jody Williams, who happens to be Judge Gull's clerk, didn't supply those exhibits along with the record when she prepared it for the appeal. Okay. So the defense appellate attorneys go and say, hey, we need these, you need these. We need them to prepare the brief, and you, the appellate court, need them so that you have a complete record in front of you. And At that point, the appellate court turns around and says, okay, here's the deal. We've been asking you to get the record complete so that we can move along with this appeal. And they gave Williams and Gull 20 days to get the thing on record. Okay. To perfect the appellate record. So that's what dropped. So they're not new in the sense like it's unearthed evidence that came out of nowhere. It's the evidence as the defense sees it that was attached as exhibits to the Franks memo. However, in terms of us seeing it, the public, it's all new. So we didn't see all this stuff. So we're kind of getting a peek behind the curtain. We're kind of getting a vision of what the defense was seeing when they started digging into things. And, I mean, there's just a lot of shocking stuff out there. And starting with kind of your first point, Tony, with, why were the feds disposed of in this case? And I'll tell you, Doug Carter got on the stand and, I mean, he testified to it at trial that he told the FBI, no, we're good. Thanks, but no thank.
Can you just turn them away like that? Can you just go, get lost, buddy. It's not your jurisdiction.
Yeah. I mean, apparently, because he did. They dipped out of the case.
Why would you?
Manpower.
Why would you? And how common is that to have happen? Especially when you're talking about, and maybe it's more common than I'm aware of. When we're talking a smaller jurisdiction here like Delphi, they don't have a lot of resources. So the FBI being like, "Hey, we're going to help you. We can really dig in here. We can give you these resources that you don't have." How common is it that small jurisdictions turn that sort of thing away? Maybe it is for the wrong reasons, which I feel like it is here, and. I just why did they do that in this case?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like that question of why does it seem like they're protecting a pedophile in Spencer? I mean, there is no good answer, and the only answer they can come up with is nefarious. Yeah, like you're talking about the Unified Command, which is this little, kind of internal investigation team that they put together, which was comprised of a bunch of guys that had never investigated anything like this. like nothing. Like
they title Unified Command.
Unified Command. Yeah. So ultimately they end up Thanks, Todd.
That's me.
Thanks, Tone. Ultimately why they did it is inexplicable. I mean, you're talking about the feds who are obviously going to have way more experience. They're going to have way more resources. They're going to have way better technology. Like why you wouldn't want them involved if they're willing to do it is inexplicable to me. And this is deeper into the investigation. I think it's in like 2019. It's like 2 years in, so I wish I had a better answer. I simply don't know. And I cannot think of a good reason as to why. It's like you're talking about these guys. I don't want to call them a bunch of Barney Fifes, but to me, from the outside looking in, they look like a bunch of Barney Fifes.
I was just going to ask about that because are all cases as confusing and jumbled behind the scenes and maybe we just don't see it? And when it all comes out into trial, it is a nice, neat package. Are they this disorganized behind the scenes all the time, or is this a extraordinary case?
No, well, I think that, you're dealing with human beings and human beings make mistakes. And you're going to have cops when you've got multiple, especially if there's multiple agencies involved. You're going to have individuals that have their own thoughts on the case. They're going to have ideas that the investigation should go one way, and another guy's going to say, well, I don't think that's it. And if that guy ranks higher than the guy who thinks it should go one way, that guy who's the lower ranking guy, his theory of the way the investigation should go is not going to be adhered to, and it's not going to be taken seriously, which is exactly what happened here. I happen to be friends with one of the guys who was originally on this case as an investigator with the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, and he was a high-ranking deputy sheriff in there. And, he was a guy who had said, look, I think this is like, we're over our skis on this one. Like we need help. We need help from qualified agencies that have done this type of investigation before, because we're going to fuck it up. And ultimately, he ends up leaving the sheriff's department. Whether it was by hook or by crook is hard to know. He ended up suing, and I think there was a settlement, but he was very much of the mindset that they needed help, because they just could not do this because they weren't equipped and they didn't have the experience to do it. So in that case, I mean,
that's a big piece of this. Like right at the beginning, you have that sort of behavior going on. You have someone saying exactly what you just said. We're in over our heads on this. We need a little bit of help. Well, we don't. And however that went down, it ends in a lawsuit, and he leaves. Obviously, it probably had something to do with this. At least that would be the tea leaves if we're going to read them, in my opinion. So you have this already. We see this track record of, are these blinders that these guys had on in this case? Because this is the thing that we always look at in here, and now that we're seeing some of these depositions and such, we're always trying to figure out, is it incompetence? Or is there something trying to be covered up here? Because the two can look very, very similar. Incompetence quite often can look very nefarious, but sometimes people are just not the brightest, or they're just not that experienced. They don't have reps in a certain area, and what they may think they should do turns out to be probably the worst idea imaginable. When you started looking at some of these depositions, Bob, what was your takeaway? What were some of the key pieces that had stood out to you?
I mean, really, Jerry Holman's was probably the most disturbing, and Jerry Holman was really the lead dude on this thing. I mean, if anybody's watched any of the Allen interrogations, and there's two of them, it's Jerry Holman that's the cop who's interrogating him in the second one, which is, the more disturbing of the two, and that is ultimately where, Rick Allen, after that interview, never saw the light of day again. He was taken into custody, and he never left that police department. When they were told to come over to that police department, or the guys that they were coming to pick up their car that they had taken to, process. So, he ends up going there. But, the Holman thing to me is just unbelievable.
What go into that for those who haven't seen the deposition? Just give us your synopsis of it.
I mean, to me, you're hearing from a cop who's essentially, in a nutshell, Tony, talking out of both sides of his mouth. And it's because they're asking him specific questions, and I think Baldwin was the one doing the questioning, but it could have been Rosie. I can't remember at this point, but. It's just like they're really kind of diving into the investigation. And what becomes apparent throughout this deposition is that they really had no idea. They initially, and for a long, long time, they believed that this was multiple people had committed this crime, and then they didn't. And, in terms of the questioning about the third-party culprit stuff, it's just, it's hard to pinpoint one thing without having me without me having it in front of me. Yeah. But like the whole thing, just the way that it reads, you really get an idea that, they really did nail a square peg into a round hole in terms of Richard Allen in this case. Once they landed on him as the guy, and once they decided, okay, well, he put himself out there, and we got this unspent casing that we think that we'll be able to go into court and say matches his weapon. That's as good as it's going to get for us. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, that's how this thing felt all along to me. And when we start getting into the exhibits with this Franks thing, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, but when you look at the things that three very qualified cops, longtime cops that continue to investigate, and we're talking about Ferenczi, Click, and Murphy, the guys who were continuing kind of on the Norse paganism type theme, that this was something that was going on, and you look at what the evidence that they developed, And, for Holman in his depth to be saying, well, Holder had an alibi. He has an alibi for a time frame that you're claiming that you think this time that the crimes took place. You know what I mean? Like, the kidnapping of the girls could have taken place at one time, and the homicides could have taken place at any time prior to when they're discovered the next day. So, for them to be acting as if it all happened contemporaneously, they're kidnapped. As soon as they get down there, they cross this river. They're all soaking wet. It's, 3.5 feet high. Alan, who's 5'4", 5'5", would be, up to his high chest, somehow controlling two girls. He gets over there and then kills them both. That all happens kind of like one thing after another. Doesn't seem to make much sense to me.
No, I mean, it's almost like if it were to be, you watch like a situation comedy, and sometimes they get the piano music moving, and then it turns into this very, funny physical comedy routine that goes on for, an extended period of time. You're like, that's all. I mean, this is a horrible situation, but that's almost what you'd be talking about. Is just like, oh, and this and then it's like all improv to work this certain way, and it's going to do this. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
it just doesn't make any sort of logical sense. What's your take here? Because the thing that was talked about early on, and then obviously it never got it into the trial, is the Odinism. And when we first heard about it way back, I remember it. We're like, what the hell? Huh? Is this real? But this is actually something the FBI's behavioral analysis unit brought into the picture we're learning about. The behavioral analysis isn't just like kind of like, well, let's spin the magic 8 ball. Let's see here. Odinism today is what we got. Looks like, kids, it might be Odinism. No, I mean, they looked into this. They found experts to talk to. There's actually quite a bit, as crazy as this shit sounds. There's quite a bit of evidence that points to at least somebody or some peoples are into this over there. It may not be quite eyes wide shut level shit, but somebody likes to do some of this stuff in some way, shape, or form, and they're practicing it in some way, shapes, or forms. At least that's what it appears.
Yeah, without question. And, if you were able to go back in a time machine, if you're the defense, in terms of making sure that the wording was more carefully put out to the public in terms of what they thought might have occurred here. Mm-hmm. I think that when they kind of worded that it was a ritual sacrifice, that was a thing that I think made people go to the place like, okay, well, that's fucking crazy.
You went to like satanic panic.
Right, because it didn't have to be that. And I don't think that it was that. I think it's exactly what you said, that you may have had a couple, 2, 3 guys that were into this kind of shit, and that for whatever reason the homicides took place, that it wasn't because of a sacrifice to the gods, but that it, whatever it was, whatever the true motive was, and that part of their belief system is what accounts for the fact that they left these sticks in this, in these particular arrangements. You know what I'm saying? So, because it's a whole different thing to think that they went out there and with the express intent goal of finding 2 girls, and they're going to sacrifice them for a specific religious purpose. Whereas whatever may have happened here, whatever the true motive was, that they're basically just going out there, and then once the deed was done, in terms of what kind of their belief system is, that they decide, okay, well, maybe we feel bad about it, maybe we're whatever the case may be, whatever their thought process is, which is really why the defense's expert Perlmutter, who didn't get to testify at trial, was really fascinating, because cops, and one of the things that she was explaining is that cops are not taught to investigate in kind of, with a magical thought process. And I know that that's kind of a corny sounding thing, but magical thought is like in real world application. If you pray, to
magical thinking.
Magical thinking. And you pray, and you're hoping that prayer is going to come true. That's magical thought. So it's not necessarily magic like wizards and shit. Right. It's just thinking that something out there. So, and everybody has their own conception of what that is personally. You know what I'm saying? So, but cops aren't trained to think in that way in terms of when they're looking at a crime scene. So when they brought the BAU in, they're looking at it and they're like, okay, this is unusual, which was enough for them to think, okay, yeah, this does have some elements of what appears to be Norse paganism. Like there's some Odinism type, like the runes, what appear to be runes are clearly something that we think that this could be a part of it. I mean, if you watched the first season of True Detective, I mean, which I think was out right around the same fucking time. Like, it had that kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
So ultimately I'm going to trust the BAU more than I'm going to trust Unified Command in terms of what their initial assessment was.
Yeah. Unified Command.
The Unified Command. So, again, everything goes back to why are they kicking the feds out of the party? It always goes back to that question for me. And, there's the entire thing with the Purdue professor, Turco, which, again, if you followed the case, you're aware that when the defense uncovered all these different things that were stuck randomly in the 15 terabytes of discovery, so as to hide them, like they weren't in one cohesive package, like, oh, here's the Odinism stuff, all in one nice, neat package. It was all stuck around like needles in a haystack. So when they end up uncovering these things piecemeal and they start looking at it and they're like, holy shit, what is going on here? And like, why did this thing go away? Why did this leg of the investigation dry up? And ultimately you can't help but wonder exactly why that took place. Because when they then go, because initially Unified Command's like, okay, there is something weird about this scene. So they go to this Purdue professor who this is his field. And they say, okay, here's the crime scene photos, man. Like, did you notice anything strange about this? And he's like, well, it certainly seems to have, some telltale signs of what looks to be some kind of Norse paganism ideology going on. He's like, I'm certainly I'm not going to say that it doesn't. So you've got this Purdue professor who they then, when they decide that they're going to take a different path, okay, they disappear that guy, at least in terms of him being any part of the investigation or that they consulted with him. So when the defense is asking, hey, who was this Purdue professor that you went to? And that's the whole thing where they're playing the game. Oh, we don't know. We forget what his name was.
Right.
Like the whole thing. And then ultimately there's emails going back between Baldwin, who's one of the defense attorneys, and McClelland, who's the prosecutor. And McClelland's telling him, oh yeah, I asked those guys and they're kind of the mindset that we'll never be able to figure it out who this guy was. And, so ultimately the defense keeps pressuring them on this point. And look, dude, like there's not going to be that many people at Purdue that are professors that are in that department that are going to be teaching this kind of shit. They were going to figure out who the fuck it was.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the defense investigator would eventually have gone over there and said, okay, which one of you guys talked to Unified Command? Which one of you guys talked to the Carroll County Sheriff's Department? Like who? And out of the three people in that department, one of them said, oh yeah, it was me. So like ultimately, McClelland's still sending out emails saying that they're not going to know. And then the interim, they end up finding out through Holman's deposition that they knew who it was and they had told McClelland. So it's
Surprise.
Like, just like the kind of shit that was going on is all the thing that happens, like all the things that happen that make you doubt this conviction so vehemently, I mean, for me at least.
There are so many reasons in the Delphi murders case to question what reality is, what's going on. We're talking with Bob Motta, defense attorney and host of the podcast Defense Diaries, about all of this as more and more documents have begun to come to light, depositions of the investigators, breaking down so many of the claims that were made, so many of the ways this was steered internally, one person saying this, another saying that, sometimes not seemingly knowing what the other one is saying. One of the big pieces in this case, Bob, as we continue to break it down, is some of the early testimony. Obviously, there is the whole, we accidentally taped over our DVR with old episodes of the Golden Girls or whatever they did when they taped over their DVR of interviews with early suspects. Like, damn, we needed more Blanche. But what we have here in some of these interviews, in some of these depositions, what we're learning about, and we've known for quite some time, but makes zero sense to the public when they start paying attention to this, is someone like Brad Holder, who on his Facebook page is allegedly, I've seen it. Allegedly it looks like people are acting out this murder scene. I don't know any other way to put it. Like two girls laying on the ground with the sticks on them. You have his buddy Elvis Fields allegedly making this statement: if my spit is found on the girls, would I still be in trouble? And these sort of things, they seem like they might be of some sort of relevance to a murder investigation. What say you?
You'd think.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
first of all, who asks a question like that? Is that something that you say when you're at lunch with your buddies? How do you even come up with a question like that to ask?
It's even worse than that. It's like, so they had taken this Elvis Fields guy, and it's Kevin Murphy, who's, again, one of those three cops that was investigating this particular, potential lead in terms of Odinism, Norse paganism, and they take him in, they interview him. And Murphy's driving him back to his trailer park. Okay. And so Elvis Fields he's out of the car. Murph's like, okay, thanks, man. We'll be in touch. And, he starts walking away, and he turns around and he goes back to the car. So he's out of the vehicle. And that's when he says this thing. He says, hey, can I ask you a question? He's like, so if my spit is found on one of the girls, but I have an explanation, am I good? Am I in trouble?
What the hell?
Dude, I don't know. People wonder why I've just been my head's been exploding about this case for 2+ years. It's how do you discount that? And I don't want to hear people saying, oh, well, Fields has a super low IQ. Yeah, I don't give a fuck. That would explain how stupid he has to be in order to go up to a cop and ask him that stupid ass question. To me, that's a perfect explanation as to why he would have done that.
Why are you spitting on the body of a dead girl? And why is that just a walk away moment?
Oh wait, I forgot. Hang on a second before I go.
Yeah, it's and beyond that, it's not just what he said to Kevin Murphy. It's what he said to his sisters. Right after the crimes took place, he goes home and he's like, I'm finally a part of something. I've got brothers now. I'm I did this thing. And, he confesses to his sister, and his sister is so disturbed by it that she reaches out to law enforcement. She's like, well, my brother has basically confessed to being a part of these crimes. They bring her in order to give her a polygraph. And the polygraph is to determine whether or not she is being truthful about what her brother said to her. And the polygraph comes back. And again, polygraphs are just tools, but law enforcement uses them in order to, be able to try to indicate if there's some kind of deception going on. And they found that she was being truthful. That her brother did in fact say this shit to her. So you compile that along with the thing that went on with Murphy, and I just don't see how you're able to ignore it in such a way. And they're like, oh, well, his phone was at the house. Well, his phone was off for 10 hours. His alibi that he was out at this hospital with Ron Abramson is cannot be verified. Like everything that they say that they did to kind of clear these guys is all bullshit.
Yeah.
When you go back to Brad Holder, and he's like, well, I was at work. Okay, well, so what? You're at work until whatever, 4:00 or 2:30. Sometime I forget what the time is, but it's sometime in that time frame, right? And that doesn't mean that the girls weren't picked up by somebody else in that crew if they're involved. Like you have to believe that the state's timeline is the correct timeline, and I just don't. I don't think that that's the concept. And I've been out to the trails, right? Mm-hmm. I went out there because I was there for all the trial. Yeah. So obviously, I went out and spent quite a bit of time on the trails, and it's a very serene place. Now it's got that kind of haunted feeling, obviously, because we know what happened there. But, I'm out there, and I was out there with my wife, and like she was taking a different path, and I walked down to the bridge. Okay. And now the way that it's currently situated is they finally, they closed it off in the sense that they built like a banister, like a railing that stops. So it leads you out to where you used to be able to walk out on the bridge if you like walked around the barricade that they had. That's how all the kids used to continually walk over that thing. And so I went out there, and Tony and Stacy, the thing that was so evident to me is that you can hear everything out there. I was standing out there, and there was no one else out there. Okay. And there was a small, I don't even know what it was. It sounded like I was standing right next to it, but if you look up to, and this is at the north end of the bridge. If you look up, there's like the kind of like a berm that goes up like from the north side where you could walk up, and then you're on the other side of Deer Creek. And that's how you would get down to Ron Logan's property without crossing the creek. So I'm looking up in that area because I can hear an animal moving around, whether it's a squirrel or a deer, whether it's big or small, I don't know, but I hear it as clear as day. My point being that with the amount of people that were out there down in that area around the time that the state is claiming, for no one to have heard anything in terms of two girls being taken by gunpoint across a creek and then the homicide taking place, like, do you think that one of the girls, while the other one is being unalived, would just be sitting there quietly while the killer is slitting her throat? I mean,
no, because they didn't get killed there, probably.
Well, right. I mean, the concept that no one heard anything in terms of
insane.
That crime.
And you got to think of that. That's a very good point to make. I'm thinking of that right now because we're getting into fall and autumn and winter and all that. And there's a dramatic difference outside on a walking trail in
Leaves
winter or summer. When you have all the leaves and the foliage is there, there's a lot of noise that's going on. When it's quiet and nothing's rustling in the trees, you can hear almost anything. You're exactly right. Yep. And this was a day like that. This was a setting like that where, you don't know if that's, I mean, sometimes a chipmunk sounds like it's a boar. And like, oh God, it's just a chipmunk that's rustling around. But yes, the sound is a huge thing. And you're exactly right. You're going to control these two girls. You're going to murder them. And then somehow they're going to be like completely clean after the murders too, because that's naturally how that happens with no blood around. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. That's where it obviously makes a lot more sense that they were killed elsewhere and then their bodies were drugged back out there, probably by more than one person. But again, all these things, somehow they tried to fit that square peg into that round hole with Richard Allen, despite all of this. Were they just hoping that no one would ever pay attention to this and they could just kind of keep going? Is this just kind of how a lot of small town cases work, where eventually, like, most never end up paying attention to it and you can just kind of shuffle them along? But now we're in a very different landscape where there's gazillions of us out there that have nothing better to do than to check each other's work or check the work of small towns and their law enforcement and their handling of cases. And they weren't anticipating having their work checked.
I mean, they could have thought that initially, You know, they're like, oh, we're just this little small town in Indiana, rural Indiana, and you know, but like they had to know in short order, like once they decided to release the bridge guy, that little clip of the bridge guy and the picture, and once the national media picked up on it, and once you know they decided to do a podcast about it, they had to know that it was becoming a high profile case.
Yeah.
Pretty early on.
And why the bridge guy video too? The video they released was edited. The sound isn't in the right place.
Yeah, so I was sitting at the trial, right, and I've been waiting like the rest of the world to watch these videos, and you knew that we were coming to that point in the trial, and McClelland talks about, okay, we're gonna play this video. I'm like, oh my God, we're finally gonna see this 43, 46 seconds, whatever it is. And so I'm sitting there like on the edge of my seat. You know, we're in a relatively small courtroom. There's one large monitor that they had kind of towards the window side of the courtroom. Okay, so you've got the jury box over to what would have been my right, and then this monitor over to the left. And I had pretty decent seats. I was like third row. So like, you know, so I'm sitting there and you're trying to take it all in, right? In you know, this 40 seconds in time. And when I'm initially watching it, it didn't seem. And so when he says that he's going to show the video, he claims that he's showing the original video first, that the one that wasn't enhanced. Okay, so I'm sitting there watching it, and when I'm watching that the first time, I don't see Bridge Guy. Okay, like when I'm watching it. Now, does that mean that he wasn't there? I don't know. I mean, it's like clearly at some point the guy appears, but in that original video, I don't see him. Is it because I'm trying to look at everything and take everything? I don't know. It was the fastest 40 seconds of my life. Like when I walked out of the courtroom, so we took a break after it. I'm like, I was asking other people, I'm like, was that the full like 40 whatever seconds? And some people were like, nah, it couldn't have been. It was too fast. And some people were like, yeah, well, that was it. I was timing it. So I'm like, you know, but you're trying to look and hear everything that hear everything that you can when you're watching it in that time. So I'm like, man, I didn't see the dude. Did you see the guy? And like various people were like, no, I didn't see him either. So I'm like, okay, that's not just me. Like, because I don't want people saying, oh, well, like Bob Motta thinks he's innocent, so he didn't say. No, like I just didn't see him. So the next video that they show is the enhanced. Okay, and in that video, you clearly see him. Now I don't know what they did because they didn't put on the kind of like foundational evidence that I would have expected to explain the process of what they did exactly to that video, to enhance it in such a way that it looks so drastically different to me. So, and then they show a third version, which they say was enhanced and stabilized, which there was no real questioning by the defense in terms or any kind of foundation laid by the prosecution as to how this occurred. Like what process did you use in order to get to this? They said some shit, like you go back to the trial transcripts and see what he says. It's like the equivalent to nothing. Well, you know, we stabilized it. So, you know, we held it real good. It was nothing.
Yeah.
It wasn't kind of the technical thing that you would hope to hear in terms of like how you were able to produce this video, which again, you know, the people that have all the serious doubts about this conviction, they look at those types of things and they're like, you know, that's why people are like, oh, well, you know, was it tampered with? You know, did it come from the actual phone? Where did this video, you know, like that creates all that kind of doubt when they're not putting forth the process in which they were able to get this thing looking the way that it did. So, you know, ultimately, you know, that video, man, is like just one of those things where I'll never understand how they were able to make it seem the way that it seemed in terms of kind of the way that, like, there was one portion of it where it seemed like from the original to where I'm watching the enhanced and stabilized thing, that like I can see it's almost as if they were able to access like the back camera Like, so you know what I'm saying? Like that they were able to access things that you weren't seeing on the original video, but that was being recorded by, like, I don't know, man. It looks so different. It looks so different.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's extended, and where the sound drops of the down the hill is not where it drops in that little snippet that they originally placed. The sound is different, and they made it so the sound would be at a different place, so it looks a lot more ominous. When I watched that video, one of the newer extended cuts of it, I don't get a real ominous feeling from the guy at all. Because the girls, if we watch it, it's they're trying to figure out. You're clearly talking about how to get underneath the bridge before the guy even gets there. Yep. They're wanting to go down the hill. They are the ones that want to go down the hill. So they're kind of fumbling around. The guy gets close enough. If you see two kids and they're trying to figure out a path to get somewhere, and you know the path, I don't think it's insane to be like, down the hill. Like, it's kind of point. Like, the path's right there. That's kind of what I got out of it. If I saw that and I didn't know anything that happened, I would not have necessarily said, a murder took place immediately after this. It just doesn't have that sort of a vibe to it when presented in its full context. And if it was such a nefarious, scary video, then why the hell did we only see 3 seconds of it up until until after you got Richard Allen convicted?
Context is everything, right?
Yeah, and we look at the whole damn thing, and it's like, this is nothing.
Right.
There's nothing to this.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's the lack of context.
Yeah.
In terms of putting out that little teeny clip is what made it so ominous.
Yep.
You don't have the entire video. And for me, like, who the hell is Libby talking to? In that portion of the video where she's like, you go down right here, like, this is like, there's no path. Like, this is where you go, like, who is she talking to? Kind of almost in a whisper. You know what I'm saying? It's like, to me, like, I just don't know if there's somebody else behind her, because we know that Abby's not to her at that point, because then she swings the camera back around, and that's when you see Abby come to, like, run past her.
She's talking to herself, with a camera and a mic. I mean, that's kind of what I got out of it. I felt like she was just kind of murmuring to herself, and there's a mic in front of her.
And she's recording it because that's what that generation does now. They document everything and they narrate it. That's
basically
kind of
narrating
how they do
her
it.
life is kind of what I got out of it.
So it's possible. It's kind of TikTok culture, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was it TikTok culture in 2017 though.
True.
It was starting.
I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, it might have been Snapchat culture.
Yeah, I mean, people are narrating stuff. We certainly had YouTube. People are narrating things at that.
Yeah,
I don't find that part I didn't find weird. I found that to be just she's making a video and kind of chatting to herself.
Yeah, but you're not taking into consideration. So if I'm to agree with your premise there, T, which I'm apt to do, but that also bolsters your claim that there didn't seem anything to be nefarious about the guy, because when she's doing that, right, like she would have presumably seen the guy at that point when she's turning around and filming that and saying, this is the path that we go down, or whatever she says. It's something to that effect. So, I mean, that would seem to indicate that if she is just continuing to kind of narrate, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, this is the path that we would go down, then I think that supports your position that they weren't thinking anything of that guy in terms of him being a threat. The other part of it that you just cannot explain, okay, which is the 207 picture, right, of Abby on the bridge that's presumably taken by Libby. However, that picture was never found on her phone, not in her picture cache, not in the Snapchat cache, nowhere. They couldn't find that phone. It came from the internet, and it's that picture of Abby with the entirety of the bridge behind her, all the way to the south. You can see all the way to the end, and there's nobody there. So, like, I have always been of the mindset that this dude ended up walking from the north end past them and then turned around. And that because like I don't know how you explain that person just doesn't exist now, because if you're out there, I mean, there's some I wish I could have gotten out onto the bridge because I would have taken measurements. I really wanted to take measurements in terms of like what the distance between the railroad ties was, but it's a scary bridge to cross.
Yeah.
Like it's not the type of bridge that you're just walking,
No,
like
there's dangers. Yes.
Yes. It's a very, very scary proposition. And especially if you're, the older you get in life, the scarier shit becomes. Like, especially a bridge that's 100+ feet off, above a creek, like when you're like old people are going to be like, oh shit, man, this is pretty terrifying.
Gone this far, this ain't worth it.
Right. So I don't know, man. It's like that picture of Abby on the bridge with nobody behind her in conjunction with the video. It does not make sense to me in terms of what their theory is, and I'm talking about the state's theory of the case.
It would be a great setting for Robert Stack in his trench coat to be walking across the bridge on.
Nice.
And then all of a sudden he trips,
visual.
and that's the end of Unsolved Mysteries forever.
Right?
It's like, oh, Robert Stack's gone. What are we looking at in the comments, Stacey, on some of this?
Lots of stuff. Our comment section today is absolutely on fire, and I want to thank everybody for their amazing comments. Scrolling back, somebody brought up, is it Greg Ferenczi?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was an interesting comment. I'm so sorry, I can't remember who said it because our comments are just blowing up today. It's way back there. But talking about that link as well. Greg Ferenczi died, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
He was murdered. Yeah.
Outside a courthouse?
A federal building. Yeah.
Okay. And forgive me if my memory is cloudy, but he could have testified to what he knew, right?
Well, of course. I mean, had she?
Do you think it was? He was murdered. It was an accidental, not accidental. It was a not targeted shooting, but there's so many deaths around this case.
Whether or not it was targeted is hard to say. I don't know that. But the problem is that Ferenczi, but he's deceased. Rest in peace to Greg Ferenczi, who by all accounts was an excellent law enforcement officer. But you still had Todd Click, and you had Kevin Murphy that would have been available to testify. They were all three working as a team together, which is where this appeal, how much they're going to dive into the third party culprit defense not being allowed at trial. I'm hoping that they're going to be diving into it pretty substantially. But those two guys could have testified. They could have testified as to what Ferenczi had uncovered in his own investigation, under the collective knowledge doctrine. So that would have been able to come in.
Okay.
Whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like Ferenczi stuff would have come in through either Click or Murphy because they all were working as a team together in terms of their investigation. Like Click wrote, kind of the Odin memo, his little thing where after they arrest Richard Allen, Todd Click is like, what the fuck just happened? And he's like sending McClelland an email saying, hey man, did you read that thing that I gave you, that 12-page investigation journal or memo that I prepared for you? Because I don't understand why you have this guy in custody when the evidence that we've been able to put together in terms of this other crew of people is way stronger. I mean, so much so that Todd Click, who's a cop, goes and hires a lawyer to figure out, like, how do I deal with this prosecutor who I think is doing the wrong thing here? And, so that's when this letter goes out to McClelland, and after Click, talks to his lawyer and says, how do I address this? What should I do with it? Because I think that they're fucking up. And, from that point forward and right before trial, to follow on with the Todd Click story, you got Ferenczi, who's killed. And that's after this Odinism thing has been going on in terms of their investigation. So whether there's a connection or not, I have no idea. But, right before trial, Todd Click, who had left law enforcement and was working for like CPS or some branch of Child Protective Services, is arrested, saying that he was fudging his records, like right before the trial on some bullshit, saying that he was going to, he was talking to parents or witnesses on cases that were to be investigated, but he didn't really go, or didn't make the phone call, or, so like some ticky-tacky shit that they come out in order to dirty him up before trial in the event that they're going to allow the third-party culprit stuff to come in. You're
right. I remember that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that shit's still pending for Todd Click. So, I mean, there was like an active, it seems to me, plan to dirty up everybody that was involved with that Odin side of it in order to be able to discredit it completely in the event that it would have come in at trial. And I mean, never forget that it was Judge Gull herself who told McClelland, hey, Nick, that whole third-party culprit thing, you might want to go ahead and file a motion to try to bar that from being introduced. And McClelland's like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So it's like, but this is all the shit that's going to be brought out in the brief. And it's just, to me, for the girls, for those families of the girls, you want this thing to have been done right the first time.
Yes.
And I've been saying it forever and ever and ever. It just wasn't. And, I don't know what the appellate court will do. I don't know what will happen if that is denied once the post-conviction petition is filed and that investigation takes place. Because the direct appeal, just so people understand, only deals with the issues related directly to the pretrial and the trial itself. You don't bring in new evidence there. Typically, in a direct appeal, it can happen, but typically you don't hammer away at ineffective assistance of counsel in that particular brief on a direct appeal. But that doesn't mean that it won't. That doesn't mean that it won't happen, because it can. It's just usually you see that in post-conviction work.
Here's the Delphi, the bridge video, or one of them. Can we do sound on that, Todd?
Yeah, let me see what I can do.
Click the sound thing down there, T, in the lower right-hand corner. It's muted. There you go.
Hi. Restart it. Here we go.
Yeah.
See, this is the path that we go down.
I think she's talking to her. She's right there.
There's no path going there, so we have to go down here.
Pause it right there. Pause it right. So if you're to take Libby's words at face value, it sounds like they were already going down there.
Yeah, they're basically discussing where the path is, where to go.
Right, before anybody says down the hill.
Yes, completely.
She's talking about this is the path that we have to take to go down. Yeah. Like if nobody and so as we're about to hear, this is when this person says down. Like so, yeah. It's just I don't know, dude. This case is insane to me.
It is.
It doesn't feel weird at all when this resumes, because it's just if these two girls are kind of like flailing around, like looking like they're anticipating to go down the hill, and you're walking by and they seem confused as to if this is a path or something, I would probably be like, oh yeah, down the hill, thinking nothing of it and continuing along my merry way. Let's play that last few seconds.
Hi.
There we go. It was just like, hi, down the hill. That's what I got out of it. Or, hey, guys, down the hill.
Yeah.
Nothing weird.
It doesn't seem strange. They just met somebody on the trail. They said hi, and then they continued about their business. It just doesn't feel like there's anything going on here.
Yeah, I mean, and there's people out there.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Then riddle me this one. Why on earth is Bridge Guy the guy? What connects
Why does
this
he have to
man
be the
on
guy?
the bridge
Right.
to magically being a murderer?
Yep.
Where did we find all the Bridge Guy clothes soaked in blood that we go, oh, well, it must be Bridge Guy who did this because the clothes he was wearing are covered in blood. It doesn't exist. It's simply because this guy was in the proximity of a murder, so as many other people who were walking around in that park that day, any of them could be just as likely to have perpetrated this crime.
Yeah.
This idea that Bridge Guy is the guy, I've never understood. I just don't. How?
Yeah, I mean, to Stefan Curry's, that's a kidnapping when you pull a gun on kids and say, guys down the hill. Well, Stefan, I guess my pushback to you on that would be, how do you know he actually pulled a gun?
Yeah, we don't see it.
Because and I completely reject. I can't remember who it was. If it was the cop that was listening to all the sound. One of. Oh
yeah, someone says they heard the gun
Yeah, he says he heard.
There's leaves crunching. I don't know how you can make out distinct sounds.
There's no way. But he said not only that the gun's racked, but he also said that he thinks that he heard her say, "Dat be a gun."
Yeah, because she's suddenly speaking that way. She's suddenly speaking at a totally different cadence than she has in any other time. Dat be a gun. Because come on, folks, common sense here. We don't even have a gun on video. We don't, the sound, because you heard a noise, amongst 1,000 other noises, well, that one must be a gun racking.
It could be a twig breaking.
And somehow this man who's on the bridge amongst many other people in that park that day, on the nice day that it was, must be the murderer because they happened to capture him on video.
I mean,
the dots don't connect.
Well, they don't, but I can see why law enforcement took it that way because it was the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, I mean,
they've got they get the phone, they get this video, they're like, oh shit, there's the guy. I mean, you can see why law enforcement decided to tunnel vision on that dude being the guy, right? Because it was the easiest thing to do, and to them it made the most sense.
It's quite a assumption though, too.
I mean, it is.
If those girls had taken more videos, they could have captured probably many more people. And I think any one of them would have been just as likely as being the person. Mm-hmm. I mean, or less likely. Because if you see the person that has a camera and they're videoing you, you think, I'm going to go kill them and leave their phone by them that they just taped me on.
Right. Place it under her.
Yeah, and place it under her body. It's not like you missed the phone and you saw her with the phone and she might be taping you. Yeah, let's go kill those two and leave the phone there.
I don't. I mean, I'm obviously with you. I'm obviously with you. I'm so ready for this appeal to, the brief to get filed, man. To see what they're going to argue and just, go.
There's a lot. I mean, if anything, all these pieces, these depositions that have come out, really just reconfirm just what a cluster this whole thing has been, that we've all known it to be, but even worse, I think, than we originally thought possible. Bob Motta, Defense Diaries, thank you so much for coming on and giving us your thoughts on this. And Buried, the John Wayne Gacy story, is that?
Inside the John Wayne Gacy investigation.
Inside the John Wayne Gacy investigation. It is available also wherever you get podcasts. Search for it right now. Buried Inside the John Wayne Gacy investigation. Multi-parts into it in ways that you have never heard this case before. So if you've been into the Peacock series, you definitely want to check this one out as a great companion to it. It's going to take you so much deeper than anything you could ever get on the series, but definitely worth
Thanks,
checking
T.
out from Bob.
Thanks.
So do check that out. Until next time, for Bob, for Stacy, for Todd, I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast. This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
We're digging into the heart of another case that we've been covering for many a years. One of the biggest injustices that I think we've seen, Richard Allen and the Delphi case. One of the most contested criminal convictions in recent history. The state of Indiana versus Richard Allen, the man sentenced to 130 years for the Delphi murders. Beyond the headlines, there was a story that raises serious legal and ethical red flags. Jailhouse calls made after months in solitary, psychiatric deterioration ignored, and a confession, if you can even call it that, ordered in the middle of a mental health collapse. The man who's been here for all of it, and in the courtroom, the very secretive courtroom that no one could get into while the trial was actually going on, Bob Motta, defense attorney, host of the podcast Defense Diaries, joining us. I know there's some activity going on in the world of appeals. I want to start there. I looked at some of the documents that you've posted, and my head's already spinning because I'm not a defense attorney. So, could you enlighten us a little bit on what the hell is going on? What's the latest now in this case in terms of where things are going?
Yeah. So where we're at right now is basically in the beginning stages of the appellate process. So anytime somebody's convicted for a crime and they have intent on appealing, first thing that has to be done in the process is, I'm not counting anything that might need to be filed at the trial court level before you can file your notice of appeal. I'm talking after a notice of appeal, which is just that. Like a notice of appeal is just saying to the appellate court, hey, we're going to be filing an appeal. Here's our notice to protect us under the statute. So we're not waiving anything. So that was done. And then the next thing that they have to do is they have to put the record together. The record's everything. So that's the trial transcripts. It's all the exhibits, because that is what the appellate court uses to see what happened down below, not just during the trial, but also during the pretrial phase. So during all the motions that were being denied without hearing over and over and over, all of those things are going to be raised during the appeal. So that takes quite a while. And then once the record is certified, meaning they've got it put together and they're saying, okay, here you go, appellate court, here's a certified record, that step is then completed. Now here it's been completed. They have a certified record. So at that point, the onus then shifts onto the appellant, which in this case is Richard Allen and his attorneys, and they have to get their brief filed. So what we've seen over the past, I think 3 months now, is Allen's attorneys have needed to get extensions for various reasons, most of which seem to be dealing with some of the exhibits don't appear to be in the record.
Okay.
Now, if you followed the case at all, if you haven't, in the Richard Allen case, also known as the Delphi case, there was a huge filing pretty early on in that case, and it was something called a Franks memo. And a Franks memo, or a motion for a Franks hearing, is essentially saying, just the real nuts and bolts kind of definition of it, that law enforcement went in front of a judge and either lied or misstated or omitted something that may have affected the judge's decision as to whether or not to issue a warrant. Okay. So in this case, one of the attorneys, Andy Baldwin, had filed this 136-page Franks memo. I had never seen anything like it. It reads like a kind of a fantasy novel. It's insane. I know, Tony, you've covered it, but it's it's got Odinists and marauding bands of Odinists, kidnapping girls and white supremacists, and it's got all this stuff. It's got the sticks and the runes and everything. It's unlike anything that I've ever seen in terms of a legal filing. So at any rate, when they filed that 136-page document, along with that was a ton of exhibits. Okay. The exhibits are what are at issue right now. So Rick Allen's attorneys are saying, hey, obviously the Franks memorandum and the repeated request for a hearing over the course of a year, and that being denied, and rulings in that Franks, when they finally did get a hearing on it, and her rulings with regard to the third-party culprit stuff that was contained within the Franks, we need to litigate that. And in order to fully litigate it, we have to make sure that the appellate court has all the exhibits. So this is where the problem is right now. And usually when I'm an Illinois attorney, I've got a lot of attorneys that I know very well and I trust implicitly in Indiana. And one of them is a lawyer named Kara Winicky. She's an appellate lawyer, a criminal appellate lawyer out there. And, she kind of knows, because every jurisdiction's different, like Arkansas is going to be different than Illinois. Illinois is going to be different than Massachusetts. Every jurisdiction has their own rules. So what I kind of like to do, I think what might be helpful if I can figure out where it is, if you don't mind, I kind of like, if you don't have it, I'd like to throw up the most recent court order that came down. Let me see if I can share it. Let me see if I can figure out which window it's in. This might be tougher than anticipated. Let me see.
Is this one that's on your X?
Yeah, you know what? I'll pull up Kara's page because she's got it right there. All right. So this is the order that came down on October 3rd. Okay. And this kind of gives us a little bit of idea of where the appellate court's at the present time. And it says the appellant has filed a verified motion to compel transmission of exhibits and asking for a new due date. The appellant states the transcript does not include certain exhibits, specifically the exhibits filed with the appellant's September 18th, 2023 motion for Frank's hearing, and exhibits 3A and 3B that were filed with the appellant's January 20th, 2025 motion to correct error. So that the motion to correct error, just so people understand, was filed post-conviction. Okay. Now in Illinois, before you file for an appeal after your client is convicted, we have to file a motion for a new trial. It's a mandatory step that we have to take before we file our notice of appeal. In Indiana, they don't have that step. In Indiana, they have the option of filing a motion to correct errors. I think, Tony, you and I covered that pretty thoroughly on one of our episodes that we did together. There was some kind of mind-blowing stuff in there, a lot of new information that came out. And so that thing was filed, and that particular thing carried a lot of new evidence, but it also was essentially saying, look, all these things went wrong before and during the trial. Yeah. So, we'd like to get a new trial. Obviously you knew Gull was not going to grant it, but it was important to make the record. So that's what they end up doing. So, and then in that, there was also a ton of exhibits that were filed. Okay. So and here's where it gets sticky. So these exhibits were not offered or admitted during a trial or a hearing. Okay. So like if I'm at trial and say, for instance, I have a piece of evidence that I want to get in and I forget during my case in chief, which it happens. You know, I mean, lawyers have a lot of moving parts during a trial, and on occasion, we're all human beings, and on occasion, sometimes an exhibit you'll forget to get it entered. You have to get it on the record and entered for it to be a part of the record. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened here, or maybe it did. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, the exhibits that were attached to the Franks memo were not entered into evidence. Okay, which means that they're not going to be showing up in the docket. Okay, so that's where the problem is. So thus, they're not a part of the transcript. However, these exhibits are part of the clerk's record. Okay, so when Andy filed it, and I know he filed, and I'm talking about Andrew Baldwin, one of the attorneys, he filed the memo itself electronically. I don't know if they attached the exhibits electronically or if they went in and hand delivered the exhibits because they're voluminous. Okay, so I tend to think that they may have brought them in, but it does say that they are part of the clerk's record. So the clerk's acknowledging that they have them and that they were filed, but they weren't filed during a hearing or a trial. So it's different. When you're filing with the circuit clerk, it's different than filing with the court clerk and getting it entered as evidence. They're two different things. So the order then says, look, all right, go over to Appellate Rule 2E, and as such, the exhibit should be provided in the appellant's appendix, okay? And then they cite the rule, Appellate Rule 50B, and then they make this ruling. So having reviewed the matter, the court finds and orders as follows. One, that the appellant's verified motion to compel transmission of exhibits and new date is granted in part as a final extension, meaning, okay, we're granting this kind of because we're saying that we're telling you, look, those exhibits weren't in the transcript, which means it's not in the record that they received, the certified record. However, we do see that it is a part of the clerk's record. Therefore, you can get it in front of us through your appendix when you file your brief. Okay. So because an appellate brief is a very lengthy document, you have a table of cases with all the cases you cite, and then eventually you have an appendix that's going to contain all your exhibits and other things as well. Okay. So they're saying that that's where it should be. Did you have a question?
No. I mean, I'm trying to follow along as best I can and connect the dots because I guess my translation would be it's a bunch of bureaucratic bullshit that really, I mean, I get there's purpose to it, but come on, for the love of God, there's got to be clearer ways of handling these things than the way we do.
I mean, you're thinking way too commonsensically. I mean,
I know
that is not how the fucking
Tony,
courts
come
work, bro.
I know.
Don't use common sense when it comes to the courts, Tony. You know better than that.
Let's make it 50 hoops of fire.
Yeah, and with glass under your feet.
Yes.
So they're kind of granting it, but they're not. And they are granting the final extension. So they're calling it a final extension. Okay. And that's problematic because so they're now, and then they go on to say in number 2 that the appellant's brief is due on October 21st, which is coming around the corner very, very quickly. Here's the problem from the appellate attorney's perspective is that when you're writing the brief, they are the ones that don't have it either. So not only does the appellate court, who doesn't have anything in front of them of substance yet, they don't have it, but more importantly, at this point, the appellate attorneys for Richard Allen don't have it. Now, again, Tony, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, why the fuck don't they just call Andy Baldwin and say, hey, man, can you send me over all the exhibits that you put in with the Franks memo? And then that would solve the problem in terms of them being able to start preparing that portion of their brief with regards, and I mean, I'm assuming that that's taking place. I don't know. I don't know what's happening with that part of it. All right. Like, I don't know if they still don't have it when they're filing a motion to compel a transmission of exhibits. That tells me that they still don't have it. You know what I'm saying? So
is it time for Richard Allen to get new attorneys?
There's a good question.
At this point, the trial attorneys have no hand in this. This is
I know. But if we're going to trace some of these problems back in time, and I get people are human and all this, but thank God that they stood up and they wanted to do this pro bono. And I know they went through hell, and I applaud them for all that. But I mean, if this is the issue, and they're not giving that to the appellate attorney, I don't know what the excuse is. I mean, we're literally talking okay, can we have that? Does it have to be securely sent in some sort of fashion? Can it be a PDF that they email over? Is it literally click send? What are we talking about?
Oddly enough, I'm having Andy Baldwin on my channel tonight, and I'm going to ask him flat out. Yeah. And Andy's never one to shy away.
And I've seen him on you before. I respect him. Yeah, I guess I want to know what the hell's going on.
Right. What we want to know is what's the fix.
Yes.
Like, how do we repair this so that everybody has what they can have, so we can just have a straight up appeal filed without any of the bullshit, and let the appellate courts decide where this thing lands.
Because look, they got a track record of bullshit with them, and it's not necessarily always on them. I mean, things getting stolen from the office and all that shit that made everything. It's like some people can be kind of clustery. I don't know, but it's like there's a pattern. There's a pattern. Let's not make this the norm, I guess, is the point.
100%. So Kara Winicky, just to kind of finish off that court order, and again, she's an Indiana appellate attorney. She says, read the order carefully. It does not compel the trial court clerk to provide the exhibits to appellate counsel. Instead, it says that the exhibits should be included in the appellant's appendix as they are part of the record. The trial clerk should have a copy of those exhibits to provide to counsel.
Should.
Exactly.
Should and does are two different things.
Exactly. So, and then she goes on to say, but if she does not have a copy, talking about the clerk, the counsel may need to file a motion to stay or stop or halt or pause the proceedings and recreate the missing portion of the record. Appellate Rule 32 lays out the process. Now, we're not going to torture our viewers here by digging into that. I mean, the bottom line that you're seeing is it's a clusterfuck. Like everything that's gone on with this particular case in Richard Allen's life has been a clusterfuck since the date of arrest. And, this is his first shot at getting a new trial. It's always your direct appeal. And, depending on who you ask, some think that he has an excellent shot at the appellate level to get it. Others don't. Others think it's going to come from post-conviction, which is a whole different can of worms. And that's a thing where I am of the mindset, along with some other attorneys in Indiana, that investigation should be underway now because of the age of the case, because you have witnesses that are aging and memories that are fading, and this thing is 8 years in. And, if you wait through the appellate process, you could be tacking on another 6 months to a year. And then you're talking about starting the post-conviction investigation basically from scratch. Okay. And just so you understand the difference between post-conviction work and direct appeals, is direct appeals deal with issues at the trial court level and are only limited to what happened in pretrial hearings and the trial. Okay. So it is not the place for you to bring up newly discovered evidence. So if you uncovered something after the trial, you can't run in an appeal and say, oh, Richard Allen needs a new fucking trial because we uncovered who really did it. They wouldn't hear it on direct appeal. That comes through a post-conviction petition. Okay.
So that's where you would introduce new evidence that you found. Okay.
Exactly. So so anything that you're digging up after the fact, or that you've dug up post-conviction, or that maybe you dug up prior to the trial finishing, but for whatever reason, trial counsel and the state was not aware of this evidence, and it passes muster as being newly discovered, because that's part of the evaluation. The court will always look, well, was this truly newly discovered, or was this available to the parties prior to trial and they just missed it? If they just missed it, as shitty and hardcore as it sounds, the appellate court's going to see that's on you. You know, we understand that it's a powerful piece of evidence. However, you know, based on what we're seeing, it appears that it was available to you. You all just missed it because it was in the discovery or whatever the case may be. Then you have to try to litigate that to see if you can get them to, you know, kind of bend their will and allow it in. So where I'm at with this thing is I would have liked, because starting the post-conviction investigation in no way, shape, or form affects the direct appeal. You know, it's not anything that would hamper the direct appeal at all. And you can be talking to people that you need to be talking to, that, you know, because there were a lot of people on that trail that day. You know? And what these people saw, if you followed the trial at all through the creators such as myself and Andrea and lawyer Lee, who were in the courtroom, what became very, very clear is that no two people saw the same thing in terms of the person they were describing. If we were to put up every description of what they're terming bridge guy looked like, every single description is different.
Well, and they could have seen different people and been submitting that information.
Are they describing even the same person?
I mean, that's my point. Yeah,
that's what Stacey's saying, and it's a great point, and it could be the absolute truth. It could be multiple people that different people are describing. So it's so you know, all these people have to be talked to. There's going to be things that were found in the voluminous tips file, which was 15,000 tips came in on this case over the course of 5 years. And some of them are mind blowing. You know, some of these tips are like, oh my God, why didn't anybody like look into this shit? Why, you know, people that were saying they were out searching, you know, at the time that the initial search ended, they were still out there, and there's just things out there that have to be fully investigated, you know, because everybody who's of the mindset that Richard Allen, because you can think two things that are kind of inconsistent with one another. You can believe that Richard Allen was railroaded and still not be necessarily sold on the fact that he didn't do this. You can think both of those things and you're fine in thinking that. You know, I think that there's you know, anybody who's looked at the way that this thing went down and who's being intellectually honest cannot say that this is how the process is supposed to work. From like not just the pretrial hearings and the way that the judge handled the entire proceeding from beginning through trial, but the fact in how this man was kept. And I don't care if you're the biggest monster that's ever walked the face of the earth. We have to have faith that the system is going to work and that person's going to get their just desserts when trial is had and whatever punishment is meted out. That's the system that we've chosen. You can't start throwing people that are innocent until proven guilty, who are pretrial detainees, into a fucking prison for 13 months and have them held in solitary confinement so they lose their mind, start eating their shit, start pounding their head against the fucking wall in order to elicit some kind of confession because you're worried that your case, in terms of the evidence you have, is not strong enough. And no one's ever going to convince me. Oh, go ahead, you guys.
Why don't they just do that in every case? Then the prosecution will always win, the DA will always be right, and you'll drive everyone insane. I mean,
isn't that the slippery slope?
Yeah, I mean, you could do it that way. If we're going to allow it here, then we should allow it for everyone. Everybody who's arrested for any charge, put them in solitary until they confess.
Minor, major, anything. We're just going to start putting you in solitary until eventually you lose your shit. And a guard says, hey, right. And a guard says, hey, you want to get out of solitary? Just tell us you did it. And you say, I did it.
Yep.
That's as simple as
problem solved. Only in America, dreaming in red, white, and blue. Only
I
in
like it.
America, we'll put you in a cage because we want to. Gull's gonna go over there, put a little stick in your cage and poke. Only in America.
Can I throw something in here?
Can we get, but before you get something in here, Stacey, can we get that burned onto a CD so I can listen to it?
Oh, it's burned in my head.
I'm going to make you a mixtape. We're going to go back even further.
I'm working on it already, guys.
Fuck the burn. Yeah, we're going to mixtape that shit. Yeah.
So we've had a couple of really good questions in the chat. Help Me Rhonda once said, I'm still hopeful the Innocence Project will get involved in this. What do you think the chances are of that? And could that be a successful route to getting this out in the open?
More resources.
Yeah, I think it's very, very high that the one of the Indiana, and just understand that most states have multiple innocence projects. Like, so Notre Dame has one in particular. I know for a fact that that Richard Allen's case has been put in front of them. In terms of whether or not they've come on board officially yet, I don't know, but I know that it is on their radar. I'm very much hoping that they're going to pick up the mantle if the direct appeal doesn't work. And again, when you're talking about innocence projects, they're not going to come on and handle the direct appeal.
Right.
That's going to be the post-conviction work. So, yeah, I mean, you want a powerhouse like that because you want to have that kind of gravitas behind you in terms of your reputation. Moving forward and saying, okay, look, if ND's Innocence Project, they're taking it on, we're going to give it some credence because they're not taking on anything that just comes and lands on their desk. They're, they really vet the cases that they're going to look at. So, I mean, that gives it credence right out of the box. And plus, you're just talking about the resources that are available in terms of that kind of entity taking it on. And you really need those types of resources for an investigation like this, because there's just a lot that has to be done. And this case just has so much, because it was cold for 5 years and there was just so much shit out there. I mean, when you go from like all the potential people that were looked at, whether it be Brad Weber, whether it be Ron Logan, whether it be the Holder clan and the Patrick Westfalls and all, there's just a lot of people out there. And Tony, that I covered the case heavily, things that I would never report, but the people were in my DMs, dude, like nonstop. And like people like claiming that they knew shit. And,
oh my God, I still get it every day. I'm sure you do too. Where it's like, the weird things that people send you. I mean, you get some dandy. Like there are some that are like, okay, this is maybe some credence here, and some like, did your cat tell you to send you that? Us that? Like, is your cat speaking to you? Because I've had some stuff where it's like, look at the pixel here. It's like, it's a pixel.
Yeah. Exactly. But I've had, there's one dude in particular who, and I would not be shocked if he's sending you shit too. He's kind of that guy.
I think we know who we're talking about here. Yeah, I blocked him already because he's also the one that the one that claims he wrote the Kim Porter book.
Oh no! I know who that is. Yeah. I've had contact. No, this guy. He doesn't have any kind of horse in the race in terms of trying to content create or kind of like a grift like that. This guy has been for 2 years with these, I'd say 5,000 word without one bit of punctuation in the entire stream of consciousness. Fucking
that's a mental health problem right there.
Oh my God. But everything that I've checked that this guy has ever said in terms of names that he's provided and charges that they've been charged with and connections that these people have, like he is really, really big on that this thing had something to do with a meth ring. I'm not willing to discount that.
Yeah, maybe he's savant. I mean, maybe it could be very savant-like as well with something like that, as far 100%. As seeing things in such ways that others don't.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.